All right. Well, good morning and welcome back to AIEC Webinar Weeks. Glad to have you. If this is your first time attending, welcome. If this is a repeat, you've been to one of our webinar weeks in the past, welcome back. We did do a drawing this morning, so if you weren't able to attend our first webinar this morning or that was not of interest to you, we did a drawing for those of you that attended our last series. We're in series 3. So for those of you that attended a webinar in series 2 and filled out one of the surveys that Ashley sent out, that made you eligible for our grand prize drawing. And Larry Burns from SIPC was our winner of our $100 Amazon gift card giveaway. So congratulations to Larry on that. Our webinar this morning will be roughly 40-45 minutes. We'll leave 10 or 15 minutes towards the end for Q&A. We do ask that you submit your questions through the chat function. If you'll select a little drop-down box and direct those questions to AIEC, those will come into Brian and myself, and we will moderate those questions to our presenters on your behalf. With that, I will turn it over to Brian.
All right, we have 3 presenters today. I'm going to introduce the first presenter. His name is Ryan Dougherty. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Geothermal Exchange Organization. He has extensive experience in public policy and governance, most recently serving as Deputy Director of the Illinois Healthcare and Human Services Framework. A decade in public service has helped inform his new role as an ambassador for geothermal heat pump technology, helping policymakers and energy professionals understand their potential. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Brian. And thanks to AIEC for the opportunity to present this morning. As Brian said, my name is Ryan Dougherty. I work for the Geothermal Exchange Organization. And who are we? Well, Geo is a nonprofit, a national nonprofit trade association working on behalf of the geothermal heat pump industry. We represent the entire sort of industry, from the manufacturers of the heat pumps themselves, manufacturers of component products that go into the machines, as well as plastic pipe manufacturers, all the way down through the chain to installers, drillers, designers, architects. We cover the whole gamut, and really our focus is representing the industry on issues of really 4 key focus areas. First and foremost is advocacy. We have a staunch representation in Washington, D.C. We've been lobbying there for about a decade now, and we've had a good deal of success on Capitol Hill. It's not always easy. Congress is a tricky beast, but we've built a strong coalition of supporters in both chambers and on both sides of the aisle. We also are engaged in public outreach. These sorts of webinars and other sort of events such as this. We're always seeking to partner with like-minded organizations such as AIEC. We are an associate member of NRECA, and we seek to strengthen those partnerships with our work throughout the year. Lastly, we're focused on consumer awareness. One of the big barriers to the prevalence and the adoption of geothermal heat pump technology is low consumer awareness. And that's a barrier that we're really aggressively attacking and having some good success in. I'll mention that in a moment. So I mentioned Washington, D.C. and our activity there on Capitol Hill. If you're familiar with geothermal heat pump technology, and any of your members have the systems in their homes or businesses, you're probably familiar with the set of incentives for geothermal at the federal level. There are a number of credits for geothermal heat pumps, both for residential and commercial installations. And we were successful at the end of this past year in getting included in a major economic stimulus and budget package, which was passed, it was signed into law by then President Trump on December 28th. And it was a big deal for us because it extended the existing tax credits, which were already on a phase out and were set to expire in a couple of years. And it gave us a little breathing room to continue to grow the industry. The credits were extended at the residential level through 2023. This year and next year, they are at 26% of the total installed cost. So if you have a member that's putting this in their home, it covers the labor, the cost of the ground heat exchanger, the drilling, the commissioning of the equipment, everything except a ductwork and a sort of a distribution system. But when you're talking about 26%, that's a pretty hefty amount, and it goes a long way toward bringing that higher upfront cost, which geothermal has, down to closer to a conventional, the cost of a conventional retrofit. Now that credit does drop in 2023 to 22%, and then it expires at the end of that year. But we are actively negotiating with the new Congress and the Biden administration about what's next for our industry. And we've been getting a lot of great feedback, some really good responses from Congress and the White House. And we are cautiously optimistic that we can extend these credits further or even achieve permanency in the code. I mentioned the commercial credit. That has been flat at 10% since its inception. And it may not be, it's not at the same level as solar, which is currently at 26%, but we are really aggressively pursuing an opportunity in Congress to achieve parity with solar and kind of come up to their level. We're at the early stages of those negotiations, but we do think that there's a chance that could happen. I would be remiss if I didn't mention one final incentive at the federal level, and that's the deduction for energy efficient commercial buildings. Your business members and commercial entities in your territory can receive a per square foot tax deduction for a range of improvements to their building envelope, lighting and things like that, but also HVAC improvements. Talking about the federal government, I should mention that we have a great relationship with the U.S. Department of Energy, who in 2019 released their Geovision Report. And in many ways, this is the roadmap for us, for our industry. It talks about what we need to do over the next 30 years. And it's a tall order. They want to see a 14-fold increase. They think the potential is there for the equivalent of 28 million US homes to have geothermal installed in them. And that's a dream that I want to see come true. Now, I talked about low consumer awareness and other barriers, historically low price of natural gas, the higher upfront cost of geothermal. These are barriers, but we as an industry are working very aggressively to attack these barriers. And my colleagues here today are going to talk a little bit more about some of the advancements in the technology and why there are reasons to be excited about future growth. I would urge you to go to DOE's website. You can just plug this into Google and find more information about it. It's a great report, and it's something that we're taking to heart and really using as I said, as a roadmap. What else is exciting in the world of geothermal? Well, a lot of people, a lot of entities, a lot of businesses, a lot of municipalities are really taking a hard look at the technology and saying, you know, this stuff's been around for decades, but we're moving into a new clean energy era, and maybe we need to give it a second look. And so you're starting to see, particularly in the Northeast, where they have gas pipeline constraints, they have a lot of people on delivered fuels, such as propane and fuel oil. And not only that, but their state governments are really kind of ahead of the curve and aggressively seeking to decarbonize buildings. Well, they're starting to build out micro districts, as they're known, where they're connecting a number of buildings together and then balancing and shifting the thermal loads around. When you do things like that, you're able to achieve very, very high efficiencies, and the savings, both from an energy perspective and on a monetary basis, are unparalleled. I mentioned consumer awareness once or twice thus far. We're doing our best to kind of attack that barrier, and we've come up with a great campaign called Geothermal for All. I would urge you to go to geothermalforall.com, check out the landing page, and really actually start with YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Geothermal for All. You'll find this odd couple that you can see on your screen. On the right, you've got the crunchy, granola-eating California tree hugger, and he's a fish out of water. He's gone to the heartland, into REC territory, and he's met real people. He's an actor, a talented guy out of Hollywood that was hired for this campaign, but he interacted with real climate skeptics. And these are people who he went and interacted with and asked, if they were ready to embrace geothermal heat pumps to save the planet. And they said, no, we're absolutely not. But you know what? We like geothermal because it saves us money. And the whole concept of this really funny and charming marketing campaign is about the fact that geothermal, it appeals to everyone. And in the halls of Congress, that's something that we've found is, regardless of your political stripe, regardless of your party affiliation or what state you represent, there's a good chance you love geothermal. You like it because it's a job creator. It gives people energy independence. And maybe if you lean a little bit differently, you like it because it is the cleanest HVAC solution in existence. It's incredibly comfortable and reliable. And so there's reasons for everyone to embrace geothermal. That's why we've tagged this campaign Geothermal for All. It's actually running on digital platforms throughout Illinois, in your member service areas. And there's a good chance that folks are seeing it in their Facebook feeds and on Instagram and connected TVs. So keep an eye out for that. We've got lots of digital assets we'd be happy to share with you if you're so interested. I should also mention a big change in the industry. It sort of represents a new era in a way, because GeoExchange, for whom I work, has always been the advocacy and lobbying arm of the industry. We've worked very closely for many years with our partners at the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, which for the last 30 years had been based at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater. Last year, OSU made the decision to move IGSPA out of OSU and find a new home for it. And we submitted a proposal early last year to OSU and basically said, we're a natural fit. We've already got great representation in Washington and around the country. Let's take on this challenge, which is now incorporating and really merging and aligning with what has always historically been the training arm of the industry. IGSPA has sort of been the flip side of our lobbying efforts. They've been the training, standards, certification, accreditation, and a bit of research organization. They've done great work at that. And now that we are aligned very closely with shared leadership, we think that this bodes really well for the industry, this sort of alignment and synergy. And we're seeing increased demand. If the Department of Energy's Geovision Report is going to come true, we have to have a highly skilled workforce to install these systems. And we're making great strides in building out the capacity to train the technicians and installers of tomorrow. This alignment is going to do great things for the industry, and I'm very excited about this new partnership. Lastly, there's a lot of other things I could mention about, I'm excited about geothermal every day. I could talk your ear off about it. But one thing that I really kind of key in on as something that is really, it's starting, I'm starting to see green shoots, and I'm starting to see this movement grow. And that is the all geothermal community. A lot of well-capitalized, well-known real estate development firms are thinking to themselves, we want to build a big subdivision. It's going to have, 1,200 homes, or in the case of Whisper Valley down in Austin, Texas, 7,500 homes. There's going to be over 30,000 people living there by the time the community, the subdivision, is completed. Every single one of those 7,500 homes is on a geothermal system. They are basically net zero capable. You can opt to have solar panels on the roofs. And when you move into this home, which is fairly affordable for the region, you end up, you're entering the property and taking the keys to this home, and you're paying about $1 a day. It's something that is really starting to catch on, and I think as more and more attention is paid to these developments, you're going to see the all geothermal community become much more prevalent. All right, well, I'm about out of time here, so I want to kick it over to the next presenter, my good friend and colleague, Will Lang, who is the Director of Utility Marketing for Water Furnace International. Water Furnace is a global leader in ground source heat pump technology. They're based in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and have a great product. Will really is his key sort of job is to inform and educate utilities, IOUs, munis, and co-ops throughout the United States, partnering with them to advance third-party ownership and provide access to renewable heating for all. He's a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy with several tours of active duty, and it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Will Lang.
Good morning, folks. Hope you're having a better day in Illinois than we've had recently. If not, I hope you've got geothermal in your home. Thank you, Ryan. We'll go through this pretty quickly. And of course, as you know, we'll have Q&A later. Ryan, if you could go to the next slide. Just a quick refresher for those of you that are new. Geothermal heat pumps are simply pumps, and that may be the best way to think of them, is that they pump heat into your home or your building in the wintertime. From the earth, which is at the core still 6,000 degrees. And surprisingly, we're not sure why, but it is. And we have a nearly inexhaustible source of heat for your home. And what the heat pump does is move for 1 unit of energy put into the heat pump, it pumps 4 or 5 units of heat into your home from the earth. And the next slide will show you that in the summertime, just the opposite happens. The earth is also a great place to store heat when it's 100 degrees out. The earth where you live in Illinois is around 60 degrees, 30 feet below your feet, and it never changes seasonally. It's climate resilient, and the heat is well absorbed by 60-degree ground temperatures. If you think about the alternative with an air source heat pump, trying to pump the heat into 100-degree weather, that's a hard place to put heat. So the ground is a much more receptive tool. So like in the wintertime, 1 unit of electrical energy into the heat pump yields 5, maybe even 6 units of cool, refreshing air in your home, along with dehumidified air. The next slide, you might ask why geothermal and why in Illinois? Ryan mentioned $2 a day. at 12.5 cents is the number that we used for this throughout the presentation per kilowatt hour. It is about $700 a year average, or about $2 a day to operate heating and cooling and also make hot water for your home, enough hot water for 2 or 3 people to live comfortably. Most geothermal systems come with a storage tank for that hot water. Illinois, great place for low-cost installations. That horizontal loop you see in the picture on the right is inexpensive and fast, easy to put in. And if you are in a rural area, you might have room to do that. If not, there are some new low-cost ways to do that vertically in a smaller area if you live in a subdivision. Here's the real reason, is co-ops, co-ops, and co-ops. We have partnered with co-ops for nearly 40 years to grow this technology. Co-ops have played a very important role in deploying geothermal heat pumps over the decades. And Illinois has been one of the places where we've had the greatest partnerships. Next slide. Or next, there you go. And extreme highs and lows. I'm going to guess that you had some below zero temperatures. Here I live in Arkansas right now, and we went to 20 below zero, which was 23 degrees colder than it's supposed to be, ever. And the geothermal heat pumps performed admirably. There has been some suggestion after that event that the alternative heat sources didn't work. The gas companies ran out of pressure and the air source heat pumps could not keep up. And the same is true when it's 110 degrees out in a heat wave. You get the same consistent performance throughout. So here's a little, we're making these crazy claims, but we do have some data. These heat pumps have variable speed inverter driven compressors like you've heard about in other types of technologies. Ultra efficient water pumps now that use less energy than a light bulb. Controls that communicate with the internet, where contractors can actually troubleshoot your system from the seat of their pickup truck. We have energy monitoring every 10 seconds. We can check heat pumps and predict failures, fix failures, reset things online. Variable airflow for great dehumidification and comfort. Zoning systems, remote diagnostics, I already referred to that. But how efficient are we talking about? You see in the columns in the table on the right, the cooling EER. We'll take a look at those. You have closed loop and open loop. Basically a range of say 22 to 53.2, pretty significant EERs depending on your installation and how your system is running. That's a lot of efficiency right there. How efficient is it? So 22 is the worst on that sheet. If you look down lower below it, there's one 2-ton air source heat pump in the world that achieves 16 EER. And that is the only one, and it's a big one, and it's only a 2-ton. There are no 5-ton air source heat pumps that even reach or exceed 13 EER. This is not SEER, this is energy efficiency ratio. How much heat and cooling do you get from how much electricity input? That's something to consider. So 22, worst case, geothermal heat pump, 16, best case, air source heat pump. And that's at 95 degrees. So underground innovations, horizontal boring. You can now bore from the street, say below your house, and never come back up. You can actually drill horizontally and insert your loop, perhaps under your house from the street, and do it at very low cost. That's a great innovation we're seeing more of across the country. We actually hired an expert in that technology to help co-ops and contractors do that for you. And there's now a new technology with a single vertical borehole that works really well in as far north as Buffalo, New York, doing 5- and 6-ton systems with a single hole. So that makes things much faster and less costly and easy to do. Next slide. So I talked about data. What you see on the map is a small section of the heat pumps that are deployed. These are all within the last few years. And some people who buy heat pumps have these monitoring systems put on them. All of the dots you see in Illinois have been running for more than 12 months consistently and have collected over 100 data points every 10 seconds. And what we have found is that these systems are unaffected by weather, flooding. Of course, they eliminate fossil fuel combustion and delivering COPs well over 3.5, which means terrific efficiency compared to any alternative. They're lasting 24 to 30 years consistently, and the loops are easily going to last more than 100 years without significant maintenance. So these 157 that you see in Illinois, I think we're now over 160 in Illinois. This was a few days ago. Each one of those represents, or all of those together, just that small sample, represent almost a 0.5 megawatt of reduction in peak load for the co-ops of Illinois. So what we think and what we've seen in the data is about 350 systems typically will give you about 1 megawatt of peak load reduction. So what do you pay for peak power? I don't know. How often do you ratchet? I don't know, but those are considerations to think about financially. If on the 4th of July you're getting crunched with peak cooling load, you could save significant money by deploying geothermal heat pumps. We've seen the math on a winter peaker in South Carolina, of all places, work out to $1,600 a ton with a rapid payback. And we can provide more information on that later. Next slide. So how does a geothermal heat pump network build a better co-op? Seasonal load variation goes away. You don't lose customers on October 1st when they switch to gas. You keep them all 12 months. You sell more electricity that way, and you service your members better that way. It's beneficial electrification at its core. It's the best thing you can do for your members by enhancing your programs to support geothermal. Long-term fuel certainty. If you have a 100-year asset underground, you're going to stick with electrical heating and cooling. You're not going to be switching back every several years when the gas company offers or the propane company offers a free water heater. You'll stick with electric. Peak load, we talked about that already. And here's one for you, durable recurring revenue. What if your co-op owned 1,000 loops, 10,000 loops? Each one of those would contribute to your bottom line monthly for many generations into the future. Might be $20 a month, it could be $50 a month. But the financial models are many to choose from. But you could actually create a durable asset on your books that contributes to your future financial security for your members and your co-op. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jim Sayers, who for 34 years tinkered over at Corn Belt G&T in Iowa and was a certified co-op communicator. I think I said that right. And is one of the finest men I know, and has been tinkering with geothermal for a few years as well. But he recently came to work with us and is teaching us more about co-ops and understanding you. So let's let Jim tell you a little bit more about what we're doing working with co-ops.
Thank you, Will, and good morning, everybody. Let me start with a question this morning. Who was the first person that ever taught you about geothermal, or when did you first learn about geothermal? As Will said, I've been around the co-op land quite a while, but I still remember how and who taught me about geothermal. And the person is the gentleman in the photo you see here in the back, Ken Krueger. This was back in the mid 80s. Ken Krueger was actually a distributor for geo equipment here in Iowa. Ken traveled around, and you can't see very well, but this is a trailer on which Ken had a geo heat pump unit. he would carry around to every co-op that would ask him, every trade show, every co-op gathering, to tell people about geothermal and its advantages. Now, the reason I show you this is because to me, the history of geo is really important, especially among cooperatives. You see, as we look back, and geo started back in the mid 80s, I think, with co-ops across the country, but the first concern was equipment. You couldn't necessarily even get geo equipment wherever you were. Well, then if you had equipment, who knew how to install it, or who knew how to install it well? And so contractors and contractor training became very important. Along with that then came member awareness. Okay, it was a new technology, brand new. Co-ops were the first ones to introduce it. How would you tell your members about it? Through various ways co-ops created to tell their members about it. And they would start promoting geothermal. Also, a lot of the incentives started back then as well. And because I've been part of cooperatives, I know very well that cooperatives share information and ideas with one another because of the cooperation of cooperatives. Next slide, Ryan. This didn't only happen in Iowa, and geo was very important to Illinois as well. John Freitag, and I think, John, you're there this morning, but this information came from John. But again, it goes back to the mid-1980s when, at that time, the co-ops, as members of Soylent, formed a water furnace distributorship in order to get equipment available to the co-ops. Back in those days, in the 1990s through the early 2000s, co-ops started offering incentives to promote geo. Member rebates, and I know in Iowa, some member rebates have been around since 1985, actually, to cause people to pay attention to geo, first of all, but then also to offer a way to help them install it more economically. Along with that, and at the same time in the early 2000s in Illinois, came along the Geothermal Alliance of Illinois as a voluntary organization, supported, or actually initiated with the support of the Association of Illinois Electric Cooperatives. As I understand from John, this operated as a voluntary organization for about 10 years. And then I think in 2017, there became an independent organization managed by John after his retirement from the co-op world there. So co-ops supports today continue in Illinois as well as other places through incentives, training, and cooperative efforts. Next slide, Ryan. One term we hear a lot about these days is beneficial electrification. And when you say that, or you think about that, it has the official definition here is to replace direct fossil fuel use, propane, heating oil, gas with electricity in a way that reduces overall emissions and energy costs. Now, back in the old days, we would talk about things like fuel switching. You know, we'd say, oh, you should use electric and replace your, in our case, propane water heaters or propane furnaces with electric. Well, that was called fuel switching, and that was not something we could necessarily say publicly. Today, beneficial electrification has the goal of fuel switching. Next slide. And BE, or as I call it, beneficial electrification, really has four primary purposes or pillars, we call them today. I'm going to start with number 4. Until about 2 weeks ago, I would say that most Americans had never thought of or even had a clue about what is an electric grid, right? Electricity is there. They had no clue about how it even got there. And it's something, as co-ops, we always talk to members about that because it's very important. But a resilient electric grid is essential. And now I think today, just because of recent experiences, a lot of members and customers of utilities know that. But the pillars of BE say that if switching to electricity does any one of these things without damaging or harming any others, then it's a good thing. And if you've been in promoting electricity like I have, you talk about number 1 forever, you know, with rates, with new technology, we need to save your members money. Number 2, I would say, is more recent and unique to BE today, because as generation resources are changing across the country. The introduction of renewable energy is a bigger part of that generation mix, has pointed out that you really can benefit the environment because of moving to electric generation as sources today. Improving quality of life, again, we talked about that as electricity benefit for many years, and fostering a resilient grid. Next slide, Ryan. Today, if you look at beneficial electrification nationally, there are some targeted electrification technologies, all listed here on this sheet. A lot of people immediately go to the lower right-hand corner and they say, electric vehicles, that's the cool technology for electricity today, isn't it? The plug-in vehicles, the hybrids that bring on the full electric plug-in vehicles. Maybe that's the more exciting thing that people are aware of. However, if you look at the list here, you see, if you read it closely, heat pumps is mentioned many, many times. One key technology in switching from fossil fuel use, direct fossil fuel use, to electric can involve heat pumps. And here it says air source and geo or ground source heat pumps, whether it's residential use or commercial use, those applications can apply. And there are other BE technologies here, which are very important as technology is developed and people become more aware. But electricity, I think, has a new life as becoming a beneficial to members and customers. Next slide. I would say ultimately, and this is again, Mr. Co-op person talking, the goal is to get rid of what's on the left-hand side and move people toward the right-hand side. A lot of benefits, and you know, if you talked about Geo, you know, and you've talked about the benefits. Of course, among the most unique, I would say, is the loops that are underground for guaranteed for 50 years, but probably 100 more years. You're like investing in your propane for 100 years once you put the loops in the ground. Your fuel source on that level is finished. So the goal of BE is to, again, improve the quality of life, save members money, and as Will, I think, really mentioned very well a couple minutes ago, because of the peak reduction characteristics of Geo, especially compared to electric resistance, and we know that, but also in comparison to air source heat pumps, especially this time of year when it's extremely cold or in the summer when it's extremely hot, can be a unique benefit to Geo. And so I would say our goal in BE is to move toward more Geo. Next slide, Ryan. Ryan mentioned at the beginning the importance of electric cooperatives to geothermal. They were, I'd say, the early adopters in the technology, the early promoters, and recently the GeoExchange organization has, and the manufacturers, I might add, are regarding that and recognizing that is very important. Next slide. I recently did an online survey, and this is not a statistical survey, I might first mention, but it was a survey among cooperatives across the country. And one of the questions was, in your own words, what are the primary benefits of geothermal heating and cooling? And then from the responses, we come up with this word cloud, and you know, it goes kind of back to our benefits of beneficial electrification: efficiency, peak load savings, costs, energy. You can see the big words, which represents what words were most mentioned in the responses. And I think as we talk to members, these are key points, because as we think about what benefits a member, cost savings is probably the top, maybe the top for most all your members. But beyond that, we have the efficiency, we have the environmental aspects, we have the peak demand savings for the co-op. In the end, we know that Geo is beneficial for the members as well as to the cooperatives. Ryan, go ahead and next slide, please. One of the questions I asked on my informal survey among co-ops is, what are the programs currently offered? If you remember the slide a minute ago that John Freitag had come up with what is going on in Illinois, this is from other areas. Actually, I have to look at my sheet here because the lower right-hand one is member rebates. Okay, so the orange piece, which was not labeled in the slide, is the member rebates. But you can see rebates is a big part that was offered among co-ops currently: heating, cooling rates, marketing, promotion. Again, what we're trying to say is, what are co-ops doing to currently help promote geothermal? And I think it's very common. Some of these things have been around a long time. Next slide. More uniquely, across co-op land are some loop programs, as I call them. We realize that loops are the unique part of geo compared to other systems that adds a cost upon initial installation. Corn Belt Energy there in Illinois has a loop lease program that helps co-op members gradually pay for loops, because that's a significant cost when you put in a geo system. CK Energy, which is in Oklahoma, actually looks at it a little differently. The co-op becomes the owner of the loops. Through an adder to the rates, the co-op purchases, or finances, I should say, the loop construction. And through an easement to the member agrees to, the co-op owns the loops, just as they own the wires going to the members' meter pole. I think both of these are examples of how co-ops can be very unique in their offering and promotion of geo. Yeah, Ryan, there you go. The other question I asked on my informal survey: what programs would you as a co-op like to learn more about? And I think what this represents to me is our opportunity for the GeoExchange organization to come up with ways to help co-ops either learn more or support one another. Contractor training, big piece there. The International Ground Source Heat Pump Association, or IGSPA, that is pretty much what the goal of that organization is to improve capabilities and training for co-ops. New technology from manufacturers. Will talked about the updated numbers for performance of units. I think co-ops are saying here that they would like to learn what is available and how good can it do. Other pieces: marketing, website information, commercial, industrial applications. All these things, I think, present us as opportunities for ways we can support geo for co-ops in the future. Okay, next slide, Ryan. There are three websites listed here that are currently available, and I would invite you to take a look at them if you haven't yet. The GeoExchange talks about the organization, but it also has a good, I'd say, Geo 101 basics for linking to if you want to show your members how do geos work, what are some typical applications, loops, those kinds of things. Geothermal for All, Ryan mentioned that site. It offers, again, I think, some good general info about geo, because even today, as we talked about in the co-op world, we have maybe getting fewer and fewer, I call them the old member service people who have been around. They've talked about geo forever, but we also have newer, younger co-op employees that they haven't heard us talk about this stuff forever. And so I think we can provide some information to teach and update those folks as well. And finally, the bottom one is the IGSPA organization. That is, again, the contractor training focused organization, providing some good tools to refer your contractors to there. Okay. In closing my part of this, I just want to mention that the GeoExchange organization and its members are here to help co-ops. Ryan mentioned we are an associate member of NRECA. I think that's important because NRECA supports its co-op members in a lot of ways, and we want to become part of that as a supporting organization. Geo and its members are there to provide training, technical support, online tools. I look forward to us sharing some best practices among co-ops and helping co-ops to help each other, and updates on technology as well. Okay. This is who we are for our contacts. And at this point, Ryan, I would like to turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Really appreciate the opportunity today. I think we have a little bit more time. If anybody has any questions, I'm sure Jim, Will, and I would be happy to take a stab at them. I think I haven't been paying attention to the chat. Brian, have we got anything that may have come through? Give us a tough one if there's a tough one.
We have had a few questions come through, and just a reminder to those attendees on here, if you do have any questions, direct those at AIC through the direct chat, and we can moderate those questions to our presenters. One question that did come in, and I think you had talked about this, Ryan, you mentioned ICSPA and their role in training and certifying geothermal professionals. Can you go into a little more detail about ICSPA's reboot and what we can expect from them in the coming months?
Yeah, that's a great question. I could spend 30 minutes talking about ICSPA, their history, their role within the industry, and kind of where they're heading. As I said before, ICSPA is really the sort of training and accreditation, certification, and standards arm of the industry. And when Oklahoma State University made the decision to kind of move them out of the university, they were looking for a new home that could really kind of give ICSPA the base on which to grow and to thrive. And that's really what our focus has been in the last few months since we've been partnered. We've reestablished a board of directors that is really, it's comprised of the breadth of the industry. So we didn't want to make it too heavily reliant on contractors or manufacturers or distributors, but we wanted to have a great cross-section of every sort of different skill set and participant within the market. So there's a great set of individuals in a leadership role, and we've just inaugurated the training committee. There have been a number of excellent ICSPA programs in existence, training curricula, and we really identified the need to update those and bring them into the 21st century. The deployment and delivery of education, training, continued education for heating and cooling professionals, design professionals, drillers. If anything, if there's nothing that really illustrated better, this pandemic has taught us that your educational opportunities and offerings really has to be modular. In many instances, it needs to be digital. But when it comes to HVAC installation and ground heat exchange installation, there's a real hands-on component there. So we're really looking closely at how do you sort of hybridize the curriculum? How do you make it easily accessible and engaging digitally? But how do you balance that with sort of in the field training? And that's something that the training committee is actively pursuing. I mentioned partnerships, and ICSPA is actively pursuing partnerships with a range of like-minded entities. We've got a call on Thursday with the leadership of the National Groundwater Association, and are talking about how we might leverage their expertise in geology and drilling subsurface conditions to forge an alliance around perfecting what is really one of the key aspects of this technology, which is putting the pipes in the ground, so to speak. So there are a lot of exciting developments. I would urge folks to look, as Jim suggested, go to the ICSPA website, follow IGSPA on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter. Do the same for GeoExchange. We've got a lot of great updates coming out frequently. So stay tuned. There's lots yet to come with IGSPA, and I'm very optimistic about what the future holds.
Thanks, Ryan. Another question that had come in, and I think you had touched on this at the beginning of the presentation. There was some discussion about federal legislative landscape and what GEO's priorities are. Can you talk a bit more about opportunities and actions on the horizon during the Biden administration?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, as a nonpartisan sort of participant in legislative and regulatory affairs, we have to play both sides of the aisle. And President Trump did some great things for this industry. In 2018, he signed our lapsed tax credits back into law. And then right at the end of his term, he extended those credits. Yes, they were part of larger packages, but they were a boon to this industry. Now we've seen the pendulum swing. You've got a new administration in the White House, and President Biden has talked a real good game about addressing climate change. We are not solely focused on the climate, the positive climate attributes of this technology, but it is one thing to be very cognizant of. And to the extent that the Biden administration and a democratically controlled Congress is pushing forward on things like the Green Act or other initiatives that would compel market participants to move towards more clean sources of energy and clean technology, utilizing that clean generation, it's going to be very beneficial for our industry. We have made some early forays and introductions with key players in the Biden administration, both at DOE, at EPA, within the White House's Council on Environmental Quality. And we've gotten a great response thus far. It's really been gratifying to see, as I talked about a little earlier, the fact that regardless of political stripe, regardless of your party affiliation, this technology can appeal to you. This is a U.S.-based, American-born and bred technology. These units are produced by skilled labor right here in America. 95+% U.S. manufactured components, and you cannot import a borehole. You need skilled drilling technicians to install these systems. And what you're doing is you're putting energy independence and power back into the pockets and into the hands of the people that this technology is going to serve. So that's something that is resonating in Washington, D.C. And it's right in line with the Biden administration's sort of emphasis on clean technology and really kind of revamping our approach to how we deal with energy in the United States. So this is a pivotal moment for our industry, and we are totally prepared to capture this excitement and kind of ride this wave into the future.
Thanks, Ryan. It looks like we have time for one more question. How is beneficial electrification unique when compared to past electric promotion programs? Why should co-ops and their members care about beneficial electrification?
Well, I am a tried and true beneficial electrification ambassador, but I would be remiss if I didn't throw this question over to the person that really taught me about beneficial electrification and its importance, Jim Sayers. So Jim, please, take the stage and tell us about BE.
To answer that question, I would go back to the 4 pillars again. And number 2 was the beneficial to the environment piece. again, in the past, and co-ops, among other utilities, have taken a beating on this, depending on the generation sources. And I think the point we can definitely make today is that compared to fossil fuel furnaces, water heaters, those kind of things located all across the country in everybody's basements, okay, electric generation, which is becoming more environmentally beneficial, more renewably based all the time, improves over time. So to me, that represents a definite benefit to co-ops. Is the benefit to the environment is something that we haven't always been able to talk about, but now we can. And I think we should proudly share that point, because electricity has always been efficient. We know that, the efficiency part, but now the renewable generation piece is becoming increasingly important, and we can offer that as well. And again, whether it's electric vehicle or you're talking about getting rid of a fossil fuel burning car engine, or the water heater in the basement, which I always talk about, it is better and improves the environment by moving to electricity.
Thank you for that, Jim. Well, Will, Brian, Jim, we want to thank you so much for your time today. It's definitely some good information here. I know our attendees today appreciate that as well. We look forward to maybe having you at one of our events here in the near future. I know we've got the CTC conference coming up. We also have our SST conference, and might definitely be a good way to get you with our membership. And I think several of our member service representatives are familiar with you, but it's always good just to connect with other people across the co-ops. So again, thank you so much for that today. If you have another slide, I know you had a slide up there with your contact information. Let's put that up one more time. And as always, if you'd like to reach out to Will or Ryan or Jim, feel free to reach out to Brian or myself. We can get you in contact with them as well.
Yes,
and also our good friend,
thanks so much, Dan.
John
Thank you, Brian.
I believe John's on the line today, so good to see your name there, John. And, I know you're deeply missed and still very much involved in the geo industry, so glad to see that familiar name.
Yeah, thanks for joining, John. Dan, Brian, Ashley, can't thank you enough for the opportunity. And I forgot to give a special shout out right at the beginning to Chris Reynolds and his team with Energized Graphics, who actually designed that Geo for Co-ops logo and the GeoExchange logo for us. You guys have such a great team there at AIEC, and we really appreciate working with you all. We're looking forward to getting back in person and joining you all at one of your shows this fall.
Well, excellent. Thanks again. Coming up this afternoon, we have Power Transformer Lifecycle Management. So if you're interested in that, please go ahead and go out and register to that. That's aiec.coop/webinar weeks. If registration happens to be closed, you can always reach out to Ashley Graham. She'll make sure that you get registered for that. And if you know someone that hasn't had an opportunity to attend webinar weeks, give them a little incentive and let them know if they attend one of our webinar week series and stick around and fill out the survey at the end. That will get them in our grand prize drawing for a $100 Amazon gift card. So look forward to doing that at the end of this series. And with that, that concludes our webinar for this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Thanks, guys.